Today we got the long-awaited second episode of the Amazing Digital Circus. I loved the pilot and it ended up being the most popular indie animated show of all time. In this video I'll give a quick synopsis and then talk about the things I liked and disliked about it and whether or not it lives up to the hype. So the episode takes place the next day after the pilot. The gang do a mission from Kane where they go to a Candy Canyon kingdom to stop some bandits. The two groups get into a battle with them all flying off a cliff. Pomni and Gummy Goo glitch out of the map into a dev room, while the rest of the characters are floating in a river talking to a large fudge monster. Pomni and Gummy Goo have a one-on-one conversation where Pomni reveals that Gummy and his friends are NPCs and not real people. Gummy Goo is obviously quite distraught, however Pomni cheers him up and the two glitch back into the map and they land back beside the main cast. They now have two trucks, so one goes with the other two gummy crocodiles, while the gang bring the second truck back to the Candy Kingdom. Gummy Goo also agrees to go with Pomni to the circus. At the Candy Canyon Kingdom, the gang goes through the teleporter back home, but not before Jax revealed that he led the fudge monster to the kingdom to eat all the NPCs. As soon as they're back in the circus, Kane one-hits Gummy Goo, saying if he keeps him there he'll get confused between who's an NPC and who's real. The gang hold a funeral for Kaufmo and the episode ends. So with the synopsis covered, let's get into my actual review. The main focus of this episode I feel like is to answer questions from the pilot, such as what happens if NPCs get into the circus, or do the characters go to sleep, or does Kane have omnipresence, or can the NPC characters gain sentience? I feel like this was a good choice as the pilot was our first introduction to the series, so the second episode building upon that was great. I think my favourite question that got answered was that Kane wasn't omnipresent. We saw in the pilot that he doesn't know exactly what everyone is doing all the time, but this episode really set that in stone, with Pomni visiting the dev room when she clearly shouldn't have been there. This will likely be a major plot point in future episodes, with Pomni almost metaphorically and physically stepping behind the curtain and seeing the inner workings of the virtual world she's trapped in, and Kane has no idea. Overall, the main thing that held the episode back a bit was the pacing. It was a bit of a dice roll. Things slowed down especially in the middle when Pomni and Gummy Goo were in the dev room. It was way slower than the pilot. It was quite quick at the start, then it slowed to a halt, and then sped up towards the end. Personally, I would have preferred if the pacing was a bit tighter, because by the end I almost lost track of the time. The first thing I noticed while watching is that the animation quality is also a little inconsistent. I'm not sure if this is just due to time constraints, but certain parts were animated really well, especially at the very start. However, in other segments, especially during the battle with the war rig, the animation definitely looks significantly worse. This is actually something that happens to a lot of other indie animations, one example being Hell of a Boss. In some episodes of that series, the quality would take a hit randomly. It's not really something that will hinder your experience of the episodes, but it's definitely noticeable. So hopefully as more episodes come out and the shows generate more revenue, it'll allow the animation to be better and more consistent. One thing that I did like about the episode was that it was completely different tonally to the pilot. The pilot was definitely a lot of le random XD funny type of humour. This episode was a complete 180, with a significant portion being just a conversation between Pomni and Gummy. It was quite emotional and somber, which was a great change of pace. I feel like for a lot of younger viewers they probably wouldn't like this, but I enjoyed it. It gave a lot of personality to both Pomni and Gummy, and it made Gummy's death at the end hit a bit harder. It was nice seeing Pomni sympathise with Gummy Goo's fear and confusion from having his world shattered, a bit like her own experience in the pilot. I think they tried to go for plot A and subplot B for this episode, which is a common theme in most shows. However, with the way it panned out and the rush timing, it feels a bit ham-fisted and neither plot really gets the time to shine. I wasn't really surprised that they killed off Gummy so quickly. I didn't believe they'd add a new cast member so soon into the series, and I think killing off Gummy was a good choice. He didn't have as much personality as the rest of the cast or even the other NPCs, so his death was basically set in stone. His death was also pretty clearly set up to explain a plot point, being that Kane doesn't want any NPCs floating around with the main cast. It'll confuse him and that could be bad, though we don't explicitly find out why that is. So perhaps they'll focus in on this in a future episode, with maybe one of the main cast being revealed as an NPC who's trying to blend in. I do think that they could have handled Gummy's death better. Throughout the episode we spent time with Gummy and everything felt quite hopeless. There was a bit of hope once Gummy entered the circus, but this was immediately ripped away by Kane. I feel like this was meant to be impactful, but we just didn't spend enough time with Gummy for his death to have proper meaning. We, as the audience, didn't have enough time to form a connection with him as a character, so his death doesn't really hit home as much as it could have. It just feels like Kaufmo's death in the pilot. I think this episode also could have been good if it was set after some more character development from Pomni. Perhaps during episode 2, Pomni would come to terms with fitting in with the world. However, if this episode was episode 3 instead, it would be far more gripping to see Pomni have an existential crisis and feel lost again. All of the characters and writing were pretty solid, and this carried over from the pilot. I love all of the main cast, with my two favourites being Pomni and Jax. though I do hope Zubul gets some more focus in the future. The jokes and their various setups were great, with my personal favourite being the revelation that Jax led the fudge monster to kill everyone in the Candy Canyon Kingdom. This was hilarious and really in character for Jax. He's easily my favourite. Setting wise, I don't think the Candy Kingdom was as compelling as the circus from the pilot. It was cool thematically, especially with the various references and fun candy characters. But we spend most of the episode in either the dev room or a swamp area. It would have been neat to spend more time in the Candy Castle, perhaps inside the castle or the streets. Instead, we spend most of the episode in this dark black and blue area, or in this wide open wasteland, which just aren't as memorable as the circus from the pilot, which had a giant toy box and felt so unique. The NPCs were great and voice acted extremely well, especially the Candy Princess and the Fudge Monster. I immediately recognised Lyle's voice. One aspect that I thought the episode reused too much was the glitching. I think it was used quite well at the start when Pomni glitched out of bed and when the truck glitched over the edge, but I feel like the bit went on too long, especially when Pomni and Gummy used glitching to go back to the Candy Kingdom. That segment was obviously a reference to dev rooms in video games, and in some games if you teleport to these rooms you get punished, are killed, or are banned or sent back. I feel like Gummy and Pomni's time in the dev room could have been more impactful if they were there for maybe 60 seconds, and then the system did something to send them back. The music was also quite solid, especially the ominous music throughout the middle of the episode and the breakcore type beat during the war rig battle. One personal criticism I have is that the end segment didn't really hit me at all. I feel like they're trying to have it come across as a somber moment for the cast, building on their characters. But because they blank out what they're saying, we lose all of this world building. Obviously, Kaufmo is just a side character who died in the pilot to explain abstraction and how the world works, but I feel like it would have been more impactful if the cast talked about Kaufmo as a person, and perhaps we saw a flashback of what he was actually like. I think the issue here was time constraints. Although the episode was 25 minutes, it felt a little rushed, and as a result they couldn't really have a significant ending. And this is also why the pacing of the episode felt a bit off. So overall, what do I think? Well, I did enjoy the episode, and I think it was a good second episode for the series. As I've explained though, there's a couple issues that hold it back. I'd chalk these up to growing pains, and are the kind of things that happen to any new indie series. I'd say the episode is about on par with the pilot. I don't think it necessarily lives up to the hype, but I don't think there was any way for it to live up to the hype anyway. This episode was hyped up so much, with the pilot getting over 300 million views. I watched the original pilot premiere before it blew up, so it's been pretty crazy seeing the rise of the series, all the content farms, and also the crazy drama. In conclusion, I'd say the episode is pretty solid and I'm excited for more. I was definitely quite critical in this review, but that's out of love for the series. I was always critical of other shows like Hazbin Hotel and Helva Boss, and those shows started out a bit rough but got fantastic as time went on. I feel like the Digital Circus will be the same. It'll take the first couple episodes to get on track, and then they'll have a couple banger episodes after. Anyway, that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Do you agree with my takes? Did episode 2 live up to the hype in your opinion? I'm interested to see your opinions in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching.